Hello, and welcome to the Card Combo Show with me, Chocobilly, where we look at weird and wonderful card combinations in the Final Fantasy TCG. This week we're going to be looking at Strago, Ashe, Yuna, Yang, and Snow. Let's get to it. Okay, so Strago from Opus 12. He is a 5-cost 7k forward. When Strago enters the field, choose one forward your opponent controls, return it to its owner's hand, then you may play one character of the same cost as it from your hand onto the field. So I really like Strago because not only is he some form of bounce, which isn't as good as direct removal, but it still has its part to play in the game. But ultimately you get to play something onto the field. Now it is quite circumstantial depending on what your opponent has, but you can pretty much guarantee that you will be able to play 3 costs and 4 costs from your hand because they're the most commonly played forwards, maybe some 2 CPs as well. So having a deck with lots of those in with Strago is probably a good idea, but I also like Strago because he can play a character, so monster, a backup, it doesn't just have to be a forward. So, Dusk is worth mentioning. I said this last week as well when I was talking about Dusk, but just in case you didn't see that. Yeah, so play Strago, bounce your opponent's 3-cost forward, bring in Dusk, you pay another water to then bring in another 3 CP forward from your hand as well. Dusk is great because he can play a forward of any colour as well. Urianger, again, Strago comes in, bounces a 3-cost, Urianger comes in, and then you get to bring in a monster as well. Maybe it's Electric Jellyfish even, which can give either of them haste and also dull one of your opponent's forwards other way. So 2 types of removal and 1 haste. Pretty good. Okay, so Forza. Yeah, just like with Dusk, Strago isn't limited on the colour of forward he can play. So you can bounce any 3 CP forward and you might just be in mono water, but have a couple of little spicy things in there, like with Forza. And bring in Forza, he'll deal 7k to something, and he's a 9k 3 CP, so that's really good value. Okay, Geos Gyno, or Gyno, how you say it. So, when a forward your opponent controls returns to its owner's hand from the field, if Geos Gyno is not a forward, Geos Gyno becomes a forward with 7,000 power, and if it receives damage, the damage is reduced by 1,000 instead. So it is a 2 CP, 7k effectively. This is more in reference to Strago bouncing something and then you gaining a forward through Geos Gyno as well. Geos Gyno. So Strago comes in, he'll bring in another forward, maybe a backup or something, and then Geos Gyno then becomes a forward as well, and if it was on the field from the turn before, it can then attack, and he's got a decent ability of reducing damage by 1,000 as well, so it's definitely got a part to play. Star Sybil. So, I really like this play because imagine you've got a Star Sybil in hand and Strago, and Star Sybil also on the field. You can break your Star Sybil to play Strago, and if your opponent has a 5 CP forward that you can bounce, you bounce that forward, and then you play Star Sybil back onto the field, which will then search you an 11 card. So that's really cool. Obviously, 5 CP forwards aren't as commonly played, like, you tend to not have more than 10 in a deck, unless it's kind of geared towards that style of deck, which they are more common these days, but still, the chance of them actually being on the field is much more less. You know what I'm trying to say though. So even still, being able to crack Star Sybil to just play Strago onto the field is really good value, and that leaves all the other backups open to then be able to do something else. Lani. So again, a 4 CP, so it's not unlikely that you'll be able to play Strago to bounce one of your opponent's 4 CP forwards, and then you bring in Lani, which then nicks one of your opponent's cards, and then you can cast it for 2 CP less as well. So it allows your field to grow quite quickly, and she also just takes away from your opponent's deck as well. So you don't even have to play the card that she takes, just if it's a card and you look at me like, oh, this is a really good card, but I don't want it in their break zone either, just don't play it, and they will never gain access to it. Buckaboo. So this is a horrible little card. I really like using him if I'm feeling particularly mean. So you play Strago to bounce something, maybe bounce a 2-cost, and you bring in Buckaboo, or Buckaboo could just be on the field. Now, if your opponent wants to replay that forward, they're going to have to sacrifice the fact that they have to discard 2 cards. Now, they may just go all in and be like, well, I'm going to play my big card that I've got in hand and use my cards to do it. But either way, you are forcing their hand to have to reconsider their strategy. And Buckaboo just generally isn't a nice card anyway. Okay, Ashe. She's A surprisingly strong little card, she's 2 CP, 5k. If you control 6 or more characters, Ashe gains plus 2000 power and Ashe cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities, which doesn't sound like much, but you'd be surprised how often that can screw over your opponent. And at the end of each of your turns, if you've cast 3 or more cards this turn, draw 1 card. So, Opus 12 had a lot of cards kind of geared towards casting and then getting more for your money by casting more cards. Again, there is a difference between casting and playing something. If you cast, a summon or ability which says play a card, like Dusk or 7-cost Phoenix, they are being played onto the field, which is not the same as cast. When something is cast, it is also played. When something is played, it is not also cast, if you catch my drift. So just be wary of that when you do things like this. So if you were to play cast Dusk and then that brings in another forward, only one of those 2 cards was cast. Anyway, sorry. So White Mage, when White Mage enters the field, choose up to 3 backups you control. If you've cast 3 or more cards this turn, activate them. So both of these cards gain something from having cast 3 cards this turn, so that's really good. But White Mage is great because you can play 2 CP backup, 2 CP backup, and then another, or White Mage, you then cast those 3 cards, all 3 of them reactivate and then allow you to play something else. I've seen a turn 1 play where it's something like Norsh Talon into Waltril, into White Mage, reactivate to then play a 3-cost Searcher, and your opponent's got 4 backups on turn 1, which is nuts. And they get a card from the Searcher as well, so White Mage is a fantastic card if you're really going for that ramp. Obviously be wary because it does get rid of a lot of cards from your hand and you'll end up your turn 2 with like 2 or 3 cards max. But yeah, obviously White Mage and Ashe really lean into this as well, so maybe you play those 3 backups, so backup, White Mage, reactivate, and then you play Ashe. You've played 3, you then get a card off of that as well, so that's pretty good. Locke, again, working with the whole casting things reduces his cost, and it would also mean that Ashe gets you a card as well, so even more reducing his cost, so to speak. So you could play a couple of cards, maybe some summons that reactivate your backups, you then play Locke to make your opponent discard and freeze a couple of things, and then Ashe will get your card back to hand as well. So Ashe is a great, if you've got a lot of cards which allow you to cast and reactivate things at the same time to cast more things, it's fantastic because Ashe will then draw you an additional card every turn. Now, it's at the end of your turn, so you obviously won't be able to make use of it until the next turn, but it's still good to have online for your opponent's turn, so maybe that card is a summon which you can then use to defend yourself or stop your opponent from doing something. But yeah, Locke being able to capitalise on things being cast as well is fantastic. Lanny! So obviously you would cast Lanny onto the field and then she steals a card, but she explicitly says when Lanny enters the field, your opponent removes the top card from their deck from the game face down. You can look at it and or cast it through, as though it were your own at any time you normally can cast it. The cost for casting is reduced by 2 CP and paid for by using any CP of any element. So she does cast the card onto the field. Unlike Phoenix or Dusk, she does cast it. So if it were even just a little 2 CP anything, she reduces it by 2, it then becomes free. You've still cast it, that's really good. So you play Lanny, you then play this card, whatever you steal. Again, you don't have to, but you can. And then, I don't know, you maybe cast something else, or you just cast Ashe. You've then cast 3 cards that turn, you get your card. Hope. So this is a little Opus 1 card that I haven't seen played much at all, but I think he's becoming a bit more relevant in Opus 12. I really like him actually. So when a Hope enters the field, choose 1 backup you control, activate it. If you have cast card name Alexander this turn, activate all the backups you control instead. So you can just dial 3 backups to play Hope, and if you have cast Alexander, they all come back online and he was effectively free, which is pretty cool. Now, Opus 12 had a decent Alexander, because up to this point all the Alexanders were not so much niche, but they weren't as playable as this one. This one is an EX burst which will always draw you a card. If you've cast 4 more cards this turn, you get to draw 2 as well. So even if you don't have the Hope combo online, you can still use Alexander to get you more cards. And again, it works with the whole theme of casting loads of things every turn. But say you've got 4 backups down, you dull 1 to play Alexander, you get a card to hand, maybe that card is Hope, and then you dull your 3 backups to then play Hope, and then all your backups come back online and you can do something else. Or you can just use Bartholomew to cast Hope. So again, you've got 4 backups. You dull 1 to play Alexander, you then dull 3 to play Bartholomew, which then plays Hope, which will reactivate all your backups, including Bartholomew. So you just accelerate massively by going to 5 active backups with a forward, and you can then continue to play more things. Maybe you're in Lightning Wind, so you can give Hope haste then as well. There's lots of funny things you can do. But Bartholomew, Hope, and this little Alexander, I think, work really, really well. Beatrix. So Beatrix can reduce the cost of your knights to be able to cast them. She can only do it once per turn, so obviously you're not going to be able to rush quite so much, but maybe you cast Beatrix onto the field, and then you cast another knight, and then you cast a summon. Ashe will then draw you a card, and Ashe is a princess, and a lot of the knight cards do work with princesses as well, so that's something to kind of work. You've got the new Jegran, I think he searches a princess. He is lightning though, so you'd be wind, water, lightning, which is a really weird mix, but you know, I'm sure you can get it to work. And then there is, what other princess cards are there? Or what other cards synergize with princess? Is there a Steiner, I think? I can't remember now. But yeah, a few of the knight cards do work with princesses, and ultimately Beatrix getting you to cast things for cheaper gets you a card from Ashe, and then you can just swarm the field even more. Lightning. So you got Ashe on the field, you cast Lightning, and then at the end of the turn, Lightning comes back to hand, and if you've managed to cast a few cards, Ashe will also draw your card to hand. So Lightning's weird because obviously she comes back to your hand, but that is then more CP in your hand to be able to do additional things. So maybe the card that Ashe draws you is a little 2 CP summon, which you can then use your Lightning to discard for, and every turn you can keep playing Lightning, and that is kind of like a guaranteed cast every turn. You know you're going to be able to play Lightning. Obviously, you don't really want to if you can't attack with her, because she does have haste and there wouldn't be much point otherwise. And she's only 5 CP, so ultimately your opponent probably will be able to block her. But if you can cast her and then cast a couple other things, maybe you can cast her and then cast a summon and then cast lock, all for really cheap, and get rid of your opponent's blockers to then swing with lightning. End of the turn, she comes back to your hand, and then Ashe will draw your card to hand as well, and you're good. Mooti. So when Mooti enters the field, when you search, 1 fire summon and add it to your hand, which is fine. And then when you cast a card named Bahamut, activate Mooti. So that's really good as well, because obviously you are getting more value back from your summons, and then casting again with Ashe draws you a card to hand, so you're getting more value for your money. Working this alongside Terra to be able to refund the Bahamuts back to hand, to then cast them again, and then use Ashe. So you could cast Bahamut, reactivate Mooti, play Terra to get that thing back, the Bahamut back, sorry, cast it again, reactivate Mooti, you then cast 3 things, you manage to reactivate your backup twice, and then Ashe will draw you a card, maybe another Bahamut. And then obviously there's the forward Bahamut as well, which works nicely with this because he effectively, with the Mooti in the field, becomes only a 2 CP forward. If you do have Fang as well, Opus 1 Fang, she reduces the cost to cast Bahamut. And if you've got Mooti down as well, you pay 3 for Bahamut, or no, sorry, you pay 1 for Bahamut, you've cast her onto the field, Mooti then reactivates, and you've paid nothing for a forward, and that still counts towards Ashe's cast. Okie dokie, so Yuna. I did do a little video about Yuna and some of the other spoilers before Opus 12 was released, but now we know all the cards, there's some more synergies I'd like to talk about. So when Yuna enters the field, if a forward you controlled formed a party this turn, draw 2 cards. That's just a strong ability anyway. When Yuna forms a party and attacks, choose 1 forward, loses 4,000 power for each attacking forward until the end of the turn. So even a 2 character party reduces power by 8,000, which is pretty good. And then pay 0, name 1 element other than light or dark. Yuna becomes the named element until the end of the turn. You can only use this ability once per turn, so she can party with any element as well, which is really good. Mid-Previa. So mid-Previa, when the party attack happens, you choose 1 active forward, deal at 8k. So let's say hypothetically Yuna became lightning, and then Yuna and mid-Previa party attacked, that's deal 8k to an active forward and minus 8,000 power to another, or to any other forward, including that forward you did 8k to. So maybe you got something that's big 10k forward and you just want to get rid of it, 8k power loss, boom, it's gone. That's 16,000 power damage swing on 1 forward. That's, I mean, I don't think there's many forwards out there that can survive that, but ultimately you can get rid of 2 forwards as well with this attack, which is really good. Andoria and Celestia. So obviously these guys are completely geared towards Yuna and their party attack mechanic. Celestia, if you have a party attack, they all gain 1000 power, which increases their survivability. And then same with Andoria, she will draw you a card if you deal damage to your opponent. And obviously your opponent doesn't really want to take a point, or doesn't really want to block a party, because chances are it'll be huge and their forward will die to it. But with Yuna and the likes of Mid-Previa, you're also taking out probably 2 forwards per party attack anyway. Then you'll be drawing a card, and they will be gaining power from Celestia as well. So these are all great cards. I will admit that this is based on a deck that I had where all these cards were in it. Some of the cards coming up were as well. These guys weren't though, they're in another deck. So Riku and Pain, this is a very obvious one because, you know, they're the 3 Gullwings, right? But it's good because Riku and Pain can party attack as well, and then you play Yuna to get your 2 cards, and then Yuna also gains the protection from Riku and Pain. Not much more to say there other than all the Gullwings you control gain haste at the end of the turn through Pain's S ability, really useful as well. So if you have a way of cheating Yuna in when you've already entered combat, maybe you have party attacked with Riku and Pain, you could then cheat in Yuna somehow, maybe a Tama or a Phoenix or something weird like that, and then you can use Pain's S, and then Yuna and something else could party, so she would have gained you 2 cards from the entry, and then she will also deal minus 8000 on a party attack as well, or just her attacking alone is good enough. Rosa. So Rosa party attacking with Yuna is really good because obviously all the forwards you control have to take 1000 power more to die. This combined with Celestia means that you've got a 2k power swing in your favour, but you party attack with those 2, maybe you minus 8k your opponent's only blocking forward, you then deal a point of damage, you get a card off of the Andoria, and then Rosa stands back up and can swing again. So Rosa, when she first came out, was like, yeah, it's great that she can party attack and reactivate and attack again, but chances are, if you could do that, you probably would have just attacked anyway. But now, with the likes of Yuna and Mid-Previa, Rosa getting that extra point of damage is really, really useful. Len. So this card is really good in my opinion. She does have her limits because obviously she can only cast a summon of 5 CP. So when Len forms a party with card name Yuna and attacks, you may search for 1 summon and cast it without paying the cost. If you do not cast it, put the summon into the break zone. If you cast a summon of cost 5 or more with this ability, put Len to the break zone. So if you would cast something like Diablos or Phoenix, Len does get put into the break zone, but this is okay because ultimately you're getting stupid amount of values because there is no limit on the cost of the summon that Len can grab. So Raiden or Arc or something silly, you know, but ultimately Yuna and Len party attack minus 8k to something, and then you cast a summon, maybe it's a little 2 CP win Diablos to then break the thing that Yuna has minus 8k to, or, you know, there's so many different things that you can do, but ultimately Len and Yuna is, if you've got Yuna in a deck, and obviously the deck is more focused around party attacking, it's probably a good idea to just have 1 Len in there, just for the fun that you can have. Okay, so Yang. I really like the design on this card. Like the full art, I think, is beautiful. I think it's the red and the purple and the yellow. Something about it, I just really like the colours. Anyway, when Yang enters the field, choose 1 forward. Until the end of the turn, it gains plus 2000 power and brave. If it is a job monk or a card name monk, until the end of the turn, it also gains when this forward attacks. Choose 1 forward your opponent controls. Deal it damage equal to this forward's power. So it's got a kind of Raoban Hecatonchia ability on there as well, but only for monks. He can choose himself ultimately, so that's fine. But he's just a standard 4 CP, 8k, so he's very much on curve. Sabin. So if you're on 5 damage, when Sabin attacks, choose 1 forward opponent controls, deal it damage equal to Sabin's ability. You play Yang, he gains plus 2000 power and brave and his own ability again. So Sabin attacks with 9000 power and he's brave, and he'll deal his power to 2 forwards, or just the same forward if you really need to get rid of something big, and that's just really good and strong, and wow. Ninja. Now if you combine Ninja with Sabin, you attack with Sabin, who is a 9k forward, and he will deal 9k, 9k, and 5k. That's just funny. Obviously, you'll have to have played Yang and Ninja both this turn to get this all to happen in one fell swoop, but ultimately to pay 6 CP for, you know, an on-curve forward and a decent enough backup, and to probably break a couple of your opponent's forwards, that's really good going. And your opponent still has the attack of Sabin on the stack to deal with as well. So you've attacked with Sabin, he's still like something stupid like 21k to 1 forward. And then they've got to deal with the fact that he's attacking as well, so and if they can't block it and they can't break him, they have to take the damage. Yeah, little Sabin as well, when he attacks, deal 2k to something, so that combines nicely with this, so maybe little Sabin attacks, he deals 5k to something, and then the additional 2k, that's 7 CP, that's perfectly fine. If you do control Edgar as well, it becomes 4 CP, so then it's a 9 CP damage deal. Obviously it's 2 packets, so beware of things like Minwoo, but still, if you've got Ku Chaspel on your backup lineup, then you'll be fine. Ursula. I prefer this Ursula to the recent Legend Ursula. I've always liked this Ursula card anyway. If you control card name Yang, Ursula gains plus 3000 power. So she becomes a 9k just with a Yang on the field, but then Yang comes in, also buffs her by 2, she becomes brave, and she'll deal her power on attack. That's really good because then that is, what, 11k she'll be dealing, and that will break pretty much most things. Again, there is no limit on the forwards that she can hit as well, and if you really want to, you can use Twin Wing Frenzy S ability as well to just take out 2 things. Chalinka. So let's say you played Yang onto the field with Ursula. No, let's say you did it with Sabin, and then you'd also played Ninja, and then you play Chalinka. So Chalinka allows Sabin to attack twice, which will be 2 loads of 9k damage and 1 load of 5 CP twice. So you can deal 9k 4 times and 5k twice. That's just stupid. Obviously you'd need me of 3 elements, but Earth, Wind, Fire. It's a band. Earth, Wind and Fire, that's a decent amount of, or that's a decent element setup anyway, they're not the worst. But that is just funny, and when the instant I realised this, I just thought it was hilarious and I had to put it in the video. Jake. So, obviously Jake can give plus 4000 to any forward that enters the field, but then you can choose a forward, it gains haste as well. So if you've got Jake on the field, you play Yang, Yang chooses himself, like I said earlier, and then you dull Jake to give Yang haste, he attacks, that is 14,000 he'll deal just from attacking himself, which is really good, and again, will probably take out most forwards your opponent controls. Okay, finally, Snow. So he's a strange card, but I like him if you get the right kind of deck or the right kind of setup. So he's 6 CP, but only 7,000 power. When Snow enters the field, you may search for 2 card named Sarah, each with a different cost, and add them to your hand. Snow cannot search for 1 card. So he does have to search 2 Sarahs. If you've only got 1 in your deck, tough luck. When Snow attacks, you may dull 1 active category 13 forward you control. When you do so, choose 1 forward, dull it, and freeze it. So he's really good for the fact that he does gain you 2 cards ultimately to hand, which makes him a 2 CP 7k. So he is above curve technically, but his dull ability, or his attack ability, is a bit strange because you're obviously having to sacrifice your forwards to dull and freeze something, but it's dulling and freezing, so you're taking out your opponent's forwards for effectively 2 turns, so it's, I think, worth it. So Zagnol, it's a 13k, it's a 13 forward, or monster technically. You play Snow, that then triggers Zagnol to become a forward, and then you attack with Snow if you gave him haste or something, or at the very least you've got Zagnol there who's a 2 CP 9k forward to block anything that might happen. But then on the next turn, you attack with Snow, you dull Zagnol, you freeze something. For 2 CP, I think that's perfectly fine. Momodi. So if you give Snow Brave and then attack with him, you can then dull himself to dull and freeze something, which I think is really, really good. And ultimately, dulling and freezing something just on a singular attack, there aren't many cards that do that. The things that I can think of are, there's Sephiroth, but your opponent has to have, is it no cards or 2 cards less, something like that. So just being able to give Snow Brave and then dulling himself to dull and freeze something is very strong. Noel. So Noel attack. I'm about to call him Noel because I'm filming at Christmas. You attack with Noel. Obviously, your opponent shouldn't be able to block it. Deals your opponent a point of damage. He then stands back up. He can attack again, but then you attack with Snow. And if your opponent does have a forward, but it's dulled, at least it becomes frozen this turn as well, and you dull Noel out. So you're still dealing the point of damage. Oh, I mean, technically, it depends how you want to roll, because you could attack with Null twice, and then attack with Snow, and not dull something to gain the freeze, but you deal an additional point of damage. But if you want to make sure that your opponent's forwards are frozen, then maybe this is the way you want to go about it. Sarah. So Sarah being on the backup lineup, if you control a card named So, it cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities, which gives this Snow a bit more survivability. And if you are actually able to dull and freeze your opponent's forwards every time you're attacking, your opponent will want to get rid of Snow. Now obviously Sarah doesn't protect him from the likes of Diablo, which is ultimately what's probably going to kill him, but it does make him that little bit harder to kill. And Lightning, like I said, giving him haste, so maybe you're in Ice Lightning and you just keep on giving Snow haste, dulling one of your forwards, then dull and freeze your opponents. If you can dull and freeze stuff whilst also gaining haste, that is super aggressive. Obviously you don't want your opponent to start slowing you down, so maybe you want to add a bit of discard in there as well, but I think these two together, along potentially with Sarah to make him harder to kill, would be a scary setup for your opponent to have to fight against. And like the Snow's card says, you can search this Sarah, so maybe you play Snow, then you play this Sarah, your opponent just has to deal with it. Chemist. So ultimately, if you attack with Snow and you don't have any active forwards, you then use Chemist to activate a 13 forward, including himself, and then just dull it so you get dull and freeze something. Simple. Okie dokie, there we go folks. Right, this will be my last video of the year, and what a year it's been. I started doing these videos in the midst of the first lockdown in the UK, and I've been wanting to do it for a while, and so far it's been quite receptive. I've got a lot of good feedback from all you guys, so thank you very, very much. It really means the world to me, and we are on our way to 200 subscribers, which is really cool. If you have any suggestions or any feedback for the videos, let me know. Please pop them just in the comments. Obviously, if you're watching this and you're not subscribed, you should be, because at the end of the day, this is a labour of love, and I do work as well full-time, so trying to get these out at least semi-regularly can be a bit tough sometimes, especially with my Let's Plays as well. So yeah, just bear with me, but the more support I get from you guys, the more I can kind of focus on doing this sort of stuff, which I do really enjoy doing and want to do more of. As I've said in previous videos, I've got a couple other video ideas in the pipeline, which hopefully will be releasing in the new year. And until then, stay safe, have a happy holiday, and I'll see you in the next video.